Hey guys, today's story is about OP's best friend, who happens to be that guy. In the 20 years I've been playing, I'm fortunate to have very few horror experiences. I guess that's because for the majority of that time, I've been lucky to have GM'd for the same group. As the time goes by, and people get married, get jobs, move, have schedule conflicts, basically life arises and the group eventually moved to gaming from twice a week to once a month and eventually not at all. I mentioned in my previous story a sorcerer. The player of the sorcerer and I are still best friends, despite it being close to 15 years since that story had happened. About 2 years ago, I moved in with him, and one day, he told me he wanted to run a Mutants and Masterminds adventure based on the SCP stories. I thought that sounded awesome. And for those of you who don't know, SCP is an online collection of stories about a fictional organization that tracks down and contains monsters and artifacts, locking them away and studying them. And Mutants and Masterminds is a superhero RPG. So in my head, I'm picturing a cross between the company from Heroes Meets Cthulhu meets Spider-Man. He invites one of his friends from college, who we will call Mark. And I invite one of my old players, who we will call Kevin. Then of course there's the GM, who I'll call Steven, and then myself. On game day, Kevin can't make it, but we forge ahead anyway. After making characters, the three of us play through about half a session before Steven wraps it up for the night, saying he needs time to think about what happens next. We had only been playing for about 2.5 hours, counting character creation. He told me later he hadn't even come up with the monster yet, despite it being his idea, and he set up the date for playing. And he wasn't even working at the time. A week later, he calls the campaign because he can't figure out anything to do with it, and it's cutting into his own time playing video games. This could have been the end. This should have been the end. But it wasn't. I had played again, and I liked it. We had 4 people who were committed to a regular game, whose schedules all lined up, and I still wanted to run. I talked with Steven and let him know that I want to run a campaign, and that I had already spoken with Kevin and Mark, and even got a hold of one of my other players, who I will call Vince, to join in a Star Wars group, and invited Steven to join. I told him the idea was that it would be Firefly-esque. An episodic adventure of a crew who were an ensemble cast. Sort of. Just trying to get along. Doing missions to keep their ship up and running, and get some money on the side. Those who were on the outskirts of the law and society, who could be a bounty hunter one week and a smuggler the next. Making friends and enemies in every port along the way.
I want to be the pilot,
Were his first words. I'm cool with that. No one else had chosen any roles on the ship yet. He was the first person who I spoke to about what the pilot would be, and we're typically first come, first serve when it comes to characters. Besides, it would all be figured out in session 0. If anyone had any problems with that, they could talk it out then. I nodded and gave the okay.
and I want to own the ship.
Well, I thought, the ship has to belong to someone, but still. I don't know, I began, him cutting me off.
If I'm piloting it, it might as well be my ship.
Fair enough. I shrugged, not really seeing the harm that this could do. It's not as if everyone wouldn't have had a stake in the ship and missions based around each other's character anyway.
And I want to be a member of the rebellion.
You did catch that I wasn't going to make the rebellion and empire a big thing. I mean, they would give you an occasional mission, or sometimes you have to outrun one of their ships, but that was about it.
I want to be in the rebellion, or I'm not going to play.
That wasn't the full threat, and I knew it. From his tone, he wouldn't just not play, but he would whine and be as obnoxious as he could be during game time to make it hard for the players. I sighed, and said I could make this work. Sure, he could be an undercover operative. That could be pretty fun. I've done that myself. Occasionally he would get jobs that would secretly help the rebellion cause, and then the group could start figuring it out, making it a mystery. what is in the thing they are smuggling, or who's the person they are hunting for a bounty, until they eventually figure out they are just working for the rebellion. Yeah, that could be a fun thing behind the scenes. Okay, I begin. But, just as a warning, not everyone on the ship will be working for the rebellion. I'm about to lay out this idea for him when he cuts me off.
If they aren't in the rebellion, I wouldn't let them on my ship.
I blink, and I told him point blank that I didn't want to run a Rebellion Empire war campaign, and that I didn't want it to be a central point besides for the background. What? I asked, disbelieving. You did catch what I said, right?
Yeah, but if I'm the pilot and it's my ship, then I wouldn't let anyone aboard who wasn't a member of the rebellion. We wouldn't be doing rebellion work and jobs.
I sighed again. For the sake of my friendship and the peace of my home, I agreed, making retreat to my room before he could dictate the game to me further. In my room, I started thinking. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. I hadn't told anyone else what I was planning on with the story besides for a Star Wars campaign. I didn't have a lot of time to dedicate as a GM, so I was planning on using published adventures and adventure hooks from the Fantasy Flight game's Twitter. And I still could do that. I would just have to use some Age of Rebellion books instead of the Edge of the Empire. Really, it's not what I was planning on running, but it could still make it work. If this was the last of it, I wouldn't be writing the story. Skip forward a few days to character creation and the first session. I had picked up an introductory module for Age of Rebellion, and I familiarized myself with it. Steve, just as he promised, had made a pilot. It was a very well-rounded character, having a little bit of every ability, but only real focus on piloting. A good support character, and honestly, I was pretty happy with it. Mark had made a sniper specializing in heavy two-handed ranged weaponry. Kevin made an infiltrator, talker character, and Vince made an engineer droid who could only talk in Imperial propaganda, as he had originally been a rebel spy. Anytime anyone starts talking about their character, Steve chimes in. Someone has electronics. So does Steve. Someone has mechanics. So does Steve. Someone had medicine. Steve doesn't, but that's okay, because Steve is
the biggest and bestest pilot in the galaxy.
Something we heard several times during creation. The module begins with the group going to a rebel base under assault. Steve refused to allow anyone to help him pilot, despite the fact his ship was made for 2 pilots. Because
I'm the pilot, so I'm the only one who should. Besides, I'm the best and biggest pilot in the rebellion, so I don't need your help.
They're being pursued by TIE fighters and have to fly through a cavern with low-hanging stalactites and stalagmites while under fire, plus at a penalty without a co-pilot. One of the players says that they can at least use the turret, and Steve tries to shoot it down, saying,
"This is my ship, and no one will do anything in it but me."
I step in and bring up the fact that Mark had gunnery skill, and Kevin could help pilot the ship, and Vince could be repairing the ship during this.
No, this is my ship and the only thing I'm good at.
We all rolled our eyes. By some miracle, he brings the ship in close enough to the base for its guns to shoot off the TIE fighters, but the ship is messed up, and Steven is mad. Muttering angrily under his breath, mad. In the next phase of the adventure, there's an AT-AT making its way down a canyon right to the base. It's supported by 4 AT-STs, and something like 50 to 100 stormtroopers. In the canyon, there is a walkway carved that has explosives placed in it, and an electronics check is needed to cause them to go boom. The droid has the best electronics, so he goes and volunteers, playing a clip of
For the Empire!
There are blaster cannons along the cliff edge that can be used with a gunnery check to slow down the walkers. Mark's character, who had gunnery, volunteers to use one. There are hidden entryways allowing for combat with the troops in the canyon. Kevin volunteers thinking he can use his cloaking shield and claws to take down the troopers quietly, and speeders that can be piloted to help slow down the walkers and provide cover for the cannons. Everyone turns to Steve, as he is, again,
the biggest and the bestest pilot in the whole galaxy.
Steve says,
What's the point? The OP will just try to screw me over like he did on the way here. He obviously has it out for me.
I wanted to explode, but thankfully the rest of the group had my back. They reminded him how he refused to let them do anything. He didn't let the gunner shoot. He didn't let the co-pilot. He didn't let the mechanic fix things. And instead, they had to watch him do everything. He sighed and dropped the point, still shooting daggers at me and trying to figure out where best to go. He was reminded once again about the speeders, but he just shook his head and muttered something about me.
I could do the explosives. I have 1 rank in computer.
The droid had 3.
I could use the turret. I have 1 rank in gunnery.
The gunner had 3. After this, he began to argue with everyone that because he had 1 rank in something, he obviously was the best choice for everything.
I can shoot. I can use computers. I can do this, so I should do this, and you should do something else.
The rest of the group had had enough at this point, and were arguing back. Finally, after some test rolls were done, and they compared the size of their modifiers, he agreed to fire a blaster pistol from the canyon face. The battle itself isn't important. The droid made the booms go boom, and the group slowed down the enemies enough for him to reach the explosives, and the party won. The only noteworthy point was that the gunner's cannon took a hit which gave him a critical injury when it exploded. In the FFG games, a critical, you roll a D percentile, and the higher you roll, the worse it is. If you roll a 140, you're dead. Each critical compounding, adding a +10 to the check until it's healed. He rolled and his arm was paralyzed. That was where I called the session. Afterwards, I spoke with Steve and let him know that it wasn't just his story. This was a group campaign, and everyone can do something in here, even if it isn't him. He can still cheer them on or offer his help. He said yeah, and that he knew and would try to do better next session, so I let it slide. He and I had spoke, and he seemed to know that he had done wrong. The party stood up for themselves as well, and he apologized. I thought it would get better. Then the next session happened. In between sessions, I had made a new character for Mark to take over since he was badly injured. I had made another heavy weapons expert, so the party didn't lose that damage, with some medical capability, which was something that the party was missing. When we began, and people were taking out their character sheets, I informed everyone that the good part about being in an army like this was that when they were injured or killed, there could be someone new assigned to the unit. I took out the character sheet I had made with Mark, and said if he wanted to, he could play this, or he could make up a new character and bring that one instead, until his gunner was healed. Stephen, of course, had a fit.
You can't just bring in a new character.
Why not? I asked in a calm voice. And I'm very proud that I stayed calm for the entire fight.
Because you just can't.
Yes, actually. Mark can if he chooses to.
How are you going to explain it in-game? It doesn't make any sense.
I'm pretty sure I just did. There's someone new assigned to your unit.
But where are they going to come from?
The rebellion, of course.
But what about party cohesion?
You're in the army. Your cohesion is whoever you're ordered to be with. Besides, it's not permanent. And this character fills a void you were missing. He's not only a heavy weapon specialist like Mark's old character, but also a medic. I say with a smile, handing the sheet over to Mark. Again, that is if you choose to use him. Like I said, you could build a new...
The rebellion won't fix him up. He's just a random soldier.
I can almost hear him saying,
He's not my awesome bestest pilot in the galaxy.
Looking back at Stephen. Why not? The rebellion has an entire medical frigate. And he'll get a baseline prosthetic arm. Not anything special that will give him bonuses. That is, of course, if the Bacta doesn't even take care of it. This fight went on for nearly 5 minutes, with poor Mark caught in the middle. Finally, Stephen played his trump card.
If I was injured, I wouldn't want to bring in a new character or be healed. I'd want to play through it.
Mark sighed. It's okay, I'll stick with my gunner. Looking dejected, he handed me back the sheet. He had actually been excited about the medic, his eyes lighting up looking over it, pointing out interesting things that it could do. Steve looked triumphant. Are you sure? You don't need to let Stephen dictate your character. You are a two-handed specialist who lost a hand. The weapons you could use, you don't have any ranks in. Plus, you have a penalty from the injury. And if you take a crit, it's guaranteed to be worse. On top of that, your armor is ruined from the explosion, so you're defenseless. This is not Stephen's decision to make. It's not his character. It's yours. Yeah, I guess I'm sure. With Mark having made his decision, there was nothing else I could do. Okay, I sigh. I guess you can go to the quartermaster and get a new set of armor and a blaster pistol so you can have a weapon.
No, we can't. We don't have time.
Again, Steve butts in. I guess I won't, Mark says, giving in. I let Mark know he could, but he shakes his head no and asks to move on. In the next section of the adventure, it's revealed that there's a traitor, and it's up to the party to figure out who it is. The group narrows it down to a list of suspects, and split. Half the group goes to do a background check, and half go to interrogate the first suspect. Steve decides to take a Mark with him and talk to the suspect because he has a rank in intimidation, so he can do it. But I have more ranks in intimidate and persuasion, and a higher presence, Kevin began, being a talking specialist at that.
It's okay, I have 1 rank. I want to do it and I'll do it better.
Okay, said Kevin, just done with it. I'd rather go with and help with research. I'm pretty hurt, Mark began.
I'm about to confront a traitor. You're the only other fighter here, and I want some protection.
Kevin and I scoffed, remembering that close quarters combat was actually a specialty of Kevin's. I stuck with the droid and Kevin's character, letting them know what they found could be fed to the interrogators and help them with their checks. A few checks in, and I hear,
I want to interrogate the suspect.
Stephen announces loudly, speaking over me while I was in the middle of letting them know what they found. Okay, hold on just 1 second. Let me finish with them.
No, I want to interrogate him.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm with the other party.
They can just wait until after I talk with him. What they're doing doesn't matter anyway.
Vince says, Just do it, you can come back to us. Giving me a long-suffering look that only a big brother can. Note, he is not my brother, but he is actually Kevin's. Okay, I say, turning my attention to Stephen. What's the plan?
Me and Kevin are going to interrogate the first suspect, and I want to do it.
Stephen starts questioning, and rolls a success, but a despair. A despair is a crit bad thing in the FFG games. The man, realizing that he had been found, pulls out his blaster and shoots Stephen in the face with a stun bolt, knocking him out.
But that's not fair. I have 1 rank in intimidation.
Yes, and he is a trained Imperial spy who realized his cover was blown and protected himself. Maybe next time let the person who specialized in talking do the talking, or let the researchers finish the research. Because we had just found that out and we could have warned you, responded Vince. Mark goes down next. The guy who didn't want to be there, and was forced by Steve, goes down. Since he already had a critical injury, he takes another one. This time he loses his entire arm, and the spy escapes. I ask Mark if he wants to bring in a new character, because this is the time I could. Someone could have seen what happened and come along, I reason, pulling out the backup character I had made. Mark rolled his eyes and shook his head. The group tracks down the villain, and the guy who is a two-handed weapon range specialist is forced to fight the martial artist with one arm, no armor, and no weapon, as well as being injured. He goes down in the first round, and gets a new critical injury as well. Now he was permanently paralyzed from the waist down, and before the villain is taken out, Steve, who was so proud of his 1 rank and light ranged, critical misses, hitting Mark and giving him one last injury, causing permanent brain damage. After they won the fight, Steve said he needed a break. I stayed behind and spoke with Steve while everyone left.
Well, I guess I really messed up tonight, didn't I?
Yeah,
I'm ashamed of how I've behaved in the game so far.
you should be.
It's because of me that Mark needs a new character, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm gonna stay out the rest of the night.
That's probably a good idea. I'll tell the guys you aren't feeling very well.
Thanks.
We finished that night's session without Steven, and in the next week, he had texted an apology to every player. Despite all of us agreeing to give him another chance, he didn't play the next week either. That was the last session, as life once again reared its ugly head. To me, he didn't just apologize for the railroading, or for pushing around the other players, but also for forcing me to run a game that I didn't want to run. That surprised me, and I thought he had honestly forgotten that. Though we're no longer roommates, Steven is still one of my best friends. We still speak at least once a week, and he is still one of the most generous and caring people I know. He's the kind of man who will give you the shirt off his back and ask if you're okay while doing it. He loves to tell stories and wants to help make the world a better place, even if he doesn't know how to. He will talk about video games and anime and cars for hours, and will help you move, even if you moved the weekend before. And I do mean the heavy lifting stuff too. I put this here because it's easy to judge someone based on their worst times, but with him, those moments are fleeting, and this is who he normally is. Well guys, that was pretty aggravating to read. Kudos to the OP for not really yelling or snapping at the guy, and not holding it against him personally out of game, but the OP should have probably tried to stop the guy when he was doing what he was doing, but at least it kind of has a happy ending. I will say additionally, if you have a player that is acting like this, definitely stop it when it's happening. Don't let it keep happening. But in any case, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have a story that you'd like me to narrate, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.